JD Marhevko is currently the Senior Vice President of Quality, Lean, and EHS for Accuride Corporation. 4 Accuride sites have won the prestigious Manufacturing Excellence Award. She's been involved in operations and Lean Six Sigma efforts for almost 30 years across a variety of industries. She is an ASQ Fellow, and in 2017, she was honored as Crane's Notable Woman in Manufacturing for the state of Michigan. In 2016, JD was awarded both the Shannon Medal and honored as one of the top 100 women in manufacturing by Washington, D.C.'s Manufacturing Institute. JD, take it away.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today. We're going to be talking about linking lean systems and strategic plans via the process of 50-50-20. 50% lead time reduction, 50% increase in productivity, and a 20% reduction in cost per unit through the use of Hoshin Kanri. I like to quote Will Rogers a lot, and one of his famous sayings is, if you're on the right track, you'll still get run over if you just sit there. And I think that's very true. When people are doing strong and good things in their business, they have a tendency not to listen to the advice and see what others are doing. And you need to be constantly sharpening your saw, constantly looking out for the opportunities that are ahead of us. Across this time, we're going to be tactically applying define, measure, analyze, improve, control, which is called DMAIC, to link our lean management system strategies with that of the business or the organization. The tool that we use that with is called Hoshin Kanri. We'll review how to establish KPIs, or key process indicators, and this will help to increase your understanding of how to develop, manage, and execute a strategic plan. One of the things that helps set our baseline is that definition of lean. Lean is about flow through pull. Lean is optimally the management of the materials that are being used to build the product or process. When you're trying to make things as fast and efficiently as you can, the quality also has to be there simultaneously. In order to go fast, you cannot have quality issues or inventory or rework build up. As a result, in the Toyota production system, when you see a lean house, such as on this diagram, you'll see a go and a stop type of column. The go is that lean flow. Let's go, 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 rush, rush, rush. How fast can we get it through to the next stage? And the stop, stop, stop happens when the quality isn't right, or the rework has to be done, or we have to go back and check something. So both of those things combined are what hold up that roof of customer satisfaction. By ensuring that we can flow efficiently and effectively through the quality system, it allows our organization to competitively compete with other organizations so that we can be the winner in our business. When we look at elements for lean success, we're talking about lean management, not necessarily lean manufacturing. In this diagram, when we're talking about lean manufacturing, we are looking about the efficient movement of correct things from the process. You bring things in through the raw material stage, they get transformed into a product that's being sold, and that typically happens within the 4 walls of a facility. In order to support the efficiency and the effectiveness of that transformation, transactional activities have to happen. Supply chain needs to deliver on-time products that are made of quality goods. Human resources needs to supply personnel that can do the work. The maintenance team needs to ensure that the equipment can run without having issues. Engineering needs to provide effective processes and equipment. There are a variety of transactional teams that need to provide effective and accurate data so that the production processes can happen. From an auditing perspective, people need to understand that both systems, transactional as well as operational, need to run both efficiently and effectively. When we look at those two things combined together, you can look at that within the 4 walls of an entity. or the four walls of a facility. If you have a business that's more than one plant, more than one location, or even perhaps more than one department within a large organization or campus, then you are looking at aligning the transactional value streams across the enterprise. People are vertically integrated where they deliver products to themselves, or you may make the same kind of product across a variety of countries or locations. There might be a center of excellence for engineering or for human resources. There might be a commonized financial approach. Those transactional and or operational processes also need to be in harmony with each other from an enterprise perspective. When we look at the column of items 1, 2, and 3, we are now looking, if you will, across the four walls of the business, the four walls of the overall entity of that organization, which may be not only in one facility, but in multiple locations. Once you have your lean management systems in place within the four walls of the entity, then we start to look outside to the external partners on the left-hand side. External partners are largely made up of the supply chain, the raw materials coming in, as well as the receiving information from the customers. That typically comes in view of a forecast. Supply chain comes in view of raw materials and goods. And we're taking either that transactional data, the forecast data and information, and then we're converting that into data and information to run the production facilities with, or we're receiving those raw materials to run the production facilities with. On the back end, or the right-hand side of the process, the product is going to be sent out to the customer or to intermediate parties. There are certain criteria and requirements of how those items should be shipped. Do I use truck number 1? Do I use yellow trucks? Are we shipping in sequence order? Are we delivering on a percentage of completion? In addition, there's the ability to do the financial close of the business to collect the payments. The external partners on the back end, again, go back to the customer in terms of how the logistics of the product or process are going to be delivered, as well as how are the monies going to be recovered at the end of the day. In total, when you look at all of these components, that is a lean management system, not just lean manufacturing, which typically looks at the flow of the goods from one point to the other. As we talk about Hoshin Kanri strategically and DMAIC, we want to be able to explain the internal and external customer needs. And those are identified as what we will call interested parties. More on that in a few minutes. Measure. How do we measure those performance baselines and what do our targets need to be? Based on what those measurements are, when we have a gap, what analysis needs to happen so that we can close the gap based on whatever improvement activities happen. And then as those improvements happen, how do we keep those gains? How do we sustain those improvements and control them so that we don't regress? Back to Will Rogers, it isn't what we don't know that gives us trouble, it's what we know that ain't so. And when we're defining what our problems and opportunities are, a lot of us know what the issues are, but we have to get our heads and hands around them so that they can actually be executed from a fixed perspective. So we want to be able to define our strategies for the whom. According to the ISO 9001:2015, as well as to the newer standards for the Industry Automotive Task Force, the International Automotive Task Force, the IATF, as well as other groups like telecommunications, aerospace, many of them have now a common form of definition of who our, quote, customers are, unquote. There's the customer themselves, the people that use the end product or service, the stakeholders, the personnel that provide money to the business, the employees that work on the organization. If you're a service company, they may be voluntary. Now, for example, if you're with ASQ or in a auditing perspective, this is largely a service-based organization. If you're a third-party auditor, you might be coming from the outside looking in. There's the supply chain that are providing goods and services for the products to be produced. And there's the community at large. Interested parties have their own needs, wants, and desires. They also have internal and external factors that are affecting them and what they want from a supplier or what they want from the business. There are several external factors as well as internal factors, and listed are some typical needs for each of them. Not all of these interested parties of customers, stakeholders, employees, suppliers, and communities will have the same external and internal needs. It's going to depend on the type of industry that they're in, whether they're privately or publicly held, and the very scale that they are they a small business, medium size, or large. What is critical is, from a strategic planning perspective, is that we as the entity that's doing our own strategic plan need to understand what these various interested parties need for them to be effective for us. And what do we need to do to help them be successful as well? We're all a partner. We're all in the same boat, trying to get business and sales so that we can grow at a profitable or in a successful manner. How do we know what they want? How do you know what they need? Various interested parties have different needs. And how do we get that information? For example, customers typically want QCD, quality, cost, and delivery. They may have intrinsic requests from a value perspective that doesn't have a cost related. They might want you to be easier to work with. How do you value that? Typically, you get that information through CSRs, customer-specific requests, in supplier handbooks. You might get some information on purchase orders. There might be surveys that are done. The stakeholders, primarily, they want you to show me the money. They want sales growth. They want conversion of the dollars. How do we know what they want? They're going to give us governance and directives. They're going to give us a strategic plan that tell us how we need that business to perform. Employees, they want a safe environment. They want security in their job. They want to be engaged. They don't want to park their brains at the door when they come in. All of our people want to be a proactive, productive partner in the business. How do we find that information out? Through surveys and discussions are general ways, and there could be other ways as well. Supply chain, they want more orders, they want more business, they want on-time payment, and they want reliability of orders as well. How do we get that information from them? These are just examples of different ideas of how we might get that information of what these interested parties want. This information is required if you're an auditor in the ISO and or IATF structures. When you're developing your strategic plan, they want to know that you've identified those interested parties. My interested parties may be different than yours. How many I have, where they are, how they do their work. All of those things differ. Nevertheless, I need to know who they are and what they want, and how do I take their needs into consideration when I'm developing my strategic plan. As we're developing our strategy, we go back to Will Rogers. We know that good judgment comes from experience, and a lot of that comes from learning via the bad judgment that happened originally. So as we learn what we want from our interested parties, we need to constantly evaluate how relevant it is. When we look at key performance indicators, as we know what our interested parties want from us, we will be developing key strategies. And below is a small table just showing 3 common types of strategies that an organization might see. I call these the trifecta. Typically, businesses want to increase their sales and or market share. Typically, they want an increase in cash flow, and typically they want an increase in margin. This would be, for an example, of a for-profit organization. Non-for-profit organizations may have different objectives. Other companies will have more than 3 strategies. They could have 6, 7, or more. It just depends on the company. This concept is from a performance measurement linkage chart from Brian Maskell's book, Lean Accounting, the financial lean accounting, and it just helps to show you horizontally how to determine what those key measures might look like for your particular business. I'm going to look at my key value stream goals at the corporate level. At the corporate level, I want more throughput of my product flow. I want to be able to reduce lead time. If I reduce lead time, that reduces how much inventory I have to buy, and that will increase my cash. If I improve my product quality, I won't have to pay warranty or rework or things like that, and that would help me increase my margin. If I get more cost per unit, if I increase my productivity by getting more components out with the same amount of workforce, that helps me also to increase my margin. And then my ability to collect cash. What might those value stream measures look like? It might look like sales per person or on-time delivery, world throughput yield, cost per unit, accounts receivable and days sales outstanding, and operational equipment effectiveness. Those are just some examples of value stream measures. At the cellular level, in the facility themselves or in the area where the work is specifically being done, I want to make sure that there are no obstacles. There's no obstacles to the flow process going on, such as rework or quality or line stoppages through equipment downtime or having properly trained personnel. I might want to ensure that standard work is in place and that pull and Kanban systems exist, and that there's effective changeover process through single-minute exchange of dies or rapid changeover activities. I also might want to make sure I have quality at the source. Now, this doesn't only relate to the physical production of things, it relates to the physical process of those transactional activities, making sure that the information coming through is also right the first time. At the cell level, where that work is done, whether it's transactional work or whether it is a physical transformation of a product, I want to have lower cycle time. You can have an example where a department might take 10 days to do a month-end close on the financial side, and now they can do it in 1 day. They're reducing that overall lead time and then the cycle times within to make that happen. They want to be able to build to plan and execute single piece flow, reduce variation, and have team cross-training. And some of those cellular measures where people can control their own destiny at those pieces, at those stages of the operation might be an hour-by-hour report. Again, not just in production. You could look at financial debit memo management. If we have 100 debit memos, how can we do an hour-by-hour effectiveness for that type of process? We want to look at on-time delivery, operational equipment effectiveness again, first pass yield, and training depth. You'll notice that some of these measures are the same. This way, it allows you to eliminate duplication of effort, and you don't need to have the same measure at 2 levels of the organization. This is one way to consider horizontally how to map out what measures you need at the corporate level versus what measures you need at the actual value add level where the work is being done. Once we have those measures identified, we can then go to creating our X matrix. The CEO or the Chief Executive Officer, he's going to come out with some kind of a 3 to 5 year strategic plan. And he's looking out there across the horizon. He's coming up again with that trifecta. I need more margin. I need more sales and revenue. I want more cash conversion. I want to be able to have more money to do things with. The Hoshin Kanri or X matrix process helps you convert those strategies into reality by using both horizontal and vertical alignment in the organization. From an auditing perspective, it's very helpful to see how a company can take those CEO's strategies and then convert them into a quality function, a lean function, an engineering function. How do those various functions tie themselves to those strategic visions so that the activities can occur as needed to enable the strategy to be met? The CEO, if he's got multiple groups or organizations work for him, if he needs a 10% increase in margin, differing divisions or segments or business units, whatever they're called, they're going to have different objectives within themselves. One guy might be only able to get 5%, where another person can get 15, and yet a third can get 10. And that would roll up to a 10% average. Each of those divisions are then going to take their various objectives that they've come up with, and they're going to deploy them out vertically into their sub-teams or departments and their locals. But horizontally, they're still working it out to see, how do we get that average of 10% going on? How do we horse trade? How do we play catch ball to ensure that we're still able to meet the overall strategy that the CEO has set for the business? When we look at the X matrix format, it's basically broken up into 4 components. The bottom is a listing of the key strategies. The left-hand side are the initiatives of how to achieve those strategies. The top are the tactics that are being used right in the here and now to enable those initiatives to happen. And on the right-hand side are the KPIs, or the key measures, that we've pretty much already laid out in advance of this. On the far right is the who. Who has that line item responsibility? When we look at some examples of key strategies, recall we were talking about the 5 groups of interested parties. We talked about what some of these groups are already looking for: the QCD for the customer, the trifecta for the stakeholder, the employee who wants to be engaged and not have to leave the company. They want satisfaction. They want a safe environment from an environmental health and safety perspective. The supply chain, we want quality cost and delivery from them, but they want growth from us. And then social responsibility from the community. We're going to work through an example of how this kind of looks for one type of strategy. In this example, we're going to look for one of the trifectas of margin, and this particular team wanted an increase of 5 percentage points by the 4th quarter. And we call this a SMART strategy. It's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And depending on whose book you read, that SMART might have slightly different words, but they all still mean the same thing. And this objective is SMART. It's specific about the margin. It's relevant to the health of the business. It should be attainable at 5 percentage points, and it's time-bound by making sure that it's going to be done by the 4th quarter. When I look at my margin strategy, I'm going to put on my functional hat of quality. And I'm going to say, okay, how can I help as a quality guy make the margin happen? Well, I can fix warranty. I can make warranty go down by $150,000, and that's what I'm going to put into the kitty here. That's what I'm going to contribute to make sure that margin happens. If I put on my lean functional hat, I might say, well, I'm going to look at all my part numbers that are in my portfolio, and I'm going to look at the dogs and cats and look at which part numbers are not making the right amount of margin, and I'm going to see what I need to do there. And I'm going to throw in $100,000, and with my lean hat on, that's how I'm going to help make margin happen. Now I've got 2 very, very different initiatives, but both are aligned to helping me improve my margin. When I look to the top side now, I'm going to look to the tactical actions. What am I going to do right now to help me make these 2 initiatives happen? If I look at my warranty side, I have 2 different tactics that we're planning. I'm looking at implementing a warranty team and conducting corrective action, preventive action, or CAPA, after the fact. I've already made the warranty. The bad stuff is gone out. Oh, darn. Now, how are we going to evaluate this so that I can get corrective action and preventive action in place so that I'm not incurring more warranty? But the second tactic that I'm doing here is I'm conducting a failure modes effects analysis and control plan review, a FEMA and CP review on those loss leaders. This allows me to hit it at the front end. That's a little bit of the preventive action, but the point on the FEMA control plan review is for new products coming out. If I am aggressively and effectively doing this FEMA CP review in advance of future releases, I should be able to minimize the warranty on the back end from happening to begin with. This allows me to do a squeeze play on warranty. From the portfolio perspective, I'm going to conduct a value stream map on there. I'm going to look at the part numbers that aren't performing the way I need to and decide how to rationalize those. Rationalize is a fancy way for cutting out the part numbers. I might cut part numbers that are not meeting the margin, or I might raise the pricing, or I might have to fix the process so that the part number can make the amount of money that we need. So now I've got 3 tactics to deal with 2 initiatives to manage the 1 strategy of margin. As we went before the horizontal KPIs, another way to look at your measures is to deal with the leading and lagging indicators. We've already identified some of those KPIs horizontally. What are some of the measures we need? But Benjamin Franklin said, if you manage your pennies, your dollars will take care of themselves. And we take that to mean if we watch our leading indicators, the lagging indicators will take care of themselves. Now, this table is just a list of examples in a typical manufacturing application where I might use OEE as a leading indicator. If I have good OEE, which is a combination of yield, efficiency, and equipment uptime, then I should have good on-time delivery. I should have low or positive PPM. I should have low cost of poor quality, and I should have good dollar conversion or cash conversion. So OEE is a very strong leading indicator. If that value is working well, then those lagging indicators should be taking care of themselves. Rolled throughput yield is another one that hits across all 4 of those lagging indicators. Lagging indicators are critical to industry. It depends on where you're at in the business. If you are a CEO or a customer, you pretty much use the lagging indicators to compare yourself to somebody else in the industry. Our customers compare us with our competitors on on-time delivery and PPM. That's how they compare whether or not we get the next set of business. However, from a functional execution perspective, by the time I see on-time delivery or PPM, it's too late. I've already missed the objective and now we're into a reactive situation. The more I can manage the leading indicators, the better my lagging indicators will perform. Therefore, there's a lot of focus on trying to manage leading indicators in the operations side so that the lags can be performing the way you need them to perform at the higher levels of the business. I usually like to see a 2-to-1 ratio of 2 leading indicators per every lag. People can pretty much go to town on these and have lots and lots of leading indicators, but usually if you follow the 80-20 rule, there's only going to be 2 or 3 of these for every lag that really govern the effectiveness of the results that you're going to get out. So as we look to the right-hand side for the measures, we can see that there are 3 measures that are hanging on for the margin KPI. You got the margin itself, which would be a lagging indicator. We have warranty. Now, warranty would be a leading indicator into margin. The more warranty I have, the more negative my margin effect will be. And family portfolios are a smaller sneak peek on how that overall margin is going to perform. So if I can have smaller subsets of the family portfolio margins, those would act as leading indicators to the overall margin. On the top right there, you can see who has which ownership of these various tactics. Sue's going to be managing the value stream map on the portfolio. Tom's going to be handling the failure mode effects analysis, and Joe's going to be conducting the corrective action, preventive action in the warranty teams. This is what an X matrix looks like for one item. Here we've got the margin for 5 percentage points. You can see how we've got the two initiatives of reducing the warranty and reorganizing the product portfolios. You can see the 3 tactics up top. You can see the 3 measures on the right-hand side, and you can see Joe, Tom, and Sue, and which items each one of them has. But now you can start to see the spots and dots. And for this first margin strategy, I've got 2 spots, one for each one. And you can envision that if I added a second strategy, that whatever that strategy is, let's say it's increase sales. Well, if I'm able to reduce my warranty losses, that might help me with my sales. So an initiative might be able to positively affect multiple strategies. This will then in the future allow us to have fewer initiatives than if everybody did their own and came up with their own set of initiatives. You're able to become very surgically precise in how many initiatives you need to achieve the strategies that are set by the leadership team. So here's a big one. Hold on to your eyeballs. This is a X matrix. This is a real one for a service non-for-profit organization. And it's not meant for you really to read this, but for you to get the concept. In the bottom, you can see that there are 6 strategies, 6 strategies that were set up by the parent of American Society for Quality. The Quality Management Division came up with 2, 4, 6, 8 initiatives to deal with those 6 strategies. You look at that very first initiative that's in that far right-hand column, you can see that that initiative, just by looking at the black dots, concurrently supports 3 strategies at the same time. That orange-colored initiative is hitting 4 strategies simultaneously. This allows us to have a very streamlined approach on initiative. You can see which initiatives support which strategies. When you go to the top, you have exactly the same concept. You see the tactics that are being conducted. You can see which tactics affect or support which initiatives. And you can see which tactics affect multiple initiatives. And if we became time constrained or resource constrained, I would be looking at the tactics that give me the biggest bang for my buck. That second one from the bottom is hitting 4 initiatives in one set of activities. That's going to be a pretty big deal. If I can get that one done, that's going to hit all of those different initiatives concurrently. This allows you to see at a glance that you've not left any strategy behind. You can see the interconnection of which initiatives are supporting which strategies, and then which tactics are supporting which initiatives. On the far right-hand side, you can see the KPIs, or the key process indicators, and the dual role that they serve. How are they monitoring the performance of the strategy, as well as how well are the tactics performing to the objectives that have been set at that level. You can see the names of or in this case, these are the functions of the personnel that are executing those various tactics. In this case, this is a 100% voluntary organization. All of those names and positions get paid a whole lot of nothing. And in doing this, there's a lot of separation of duties to enable people to chunk up the task into manageable bites. We're now going to look at a for-profit organization after we look at the results of the QMD. The Quality Management Division is the largest quality professional organization in the world with 21,000 global members. It's the largest division in American Society for Quality, who's got roughly more than 70,000 global members, and they do the most touch points for member interaction. When we look at a for-profit example, you can see the strategies that have been developed at the bottom by the executive team. So they have 7 strategies here, and these strategies were developed to support those 5 interested parties. The customers, the supply chain, the stakeholders, the employees, the community. On the far left-hand side, you can see in this case they have 2, 4, 6, 8 initiatives. And you can see the density of those spots and dots of how cross-cutting those initiatives are. You can see that the second initiative from the end, number 4.2, that initiative actually touches every single strategy that's out there. When you look to the tactics on top, you can see which tactics are most largely correlating with the various initiatives. The open circles are also supporting. This particular team used a closed circle for a most immediate impact and an open circle for a supporting impact. It helped. If I do tactic 1.1a, it's actually going to help support 3 different initiatives simultaneously. If I do tactic 1.2a, that second row from the bottom, that's going to hit 7 out of the 8 various initiatives. Again, a very cross-cutting tactic. On the far right, you can see the various types of key process indicators that are used, and these are a blend of both leading and lagging indicators. For this to work, it must be right for it to flow. In order for things to go quickly in an organization, you have to be able to do things right. And that's not only the production or the transformation process of the goods, it's also for the transactional activities. In this example, these organizations were monitoring their process capability on key dimensions, on critical features that had to be right and hold a good CPK. And you can see that their baseline wasn't that great when they started, but as they focused on getting an increase of process capability, they were starting to achieve world-class levels. And this team decided to correct issues that were causing losses by using that CPK, cost of poor quality focus. They also then enhanced their design and development of their new product introduction process so that they weren't perpetually releasing negative results into the business. And they used a Design for Six Sigma methodology to help that happen. And they also focused on training their people. When you want to focus on training for problem solving, that needs a different set of skills than for people that are doing Design for Six Sigma activity, who are preventing problems from occurring to begin with. You can have the same people trained in both skill sets, and I strongly recommend that. Nevertheless, you need to recognize that they are 2 different sets of skills, and both need attention to that level of detail to be effective. You can see that as the process capabilities improved across the businesses, that the cost of poor quality went down, which was desired. And flow means go. We talked about that 50-50-20 at the very beginning. In this organization, they had an average of 50% reduction in lead time. And as you're making things go through twice as fast, I mean, it used to take 10 days, now it takes 5, and you try and wrap your head around that. And it's like, okay, if my transformation processes, if my ability to make things isn't equally fixed or up to the task, all I'm going to do is make twice as much stuff bad or incorrectly. And that you can't let that happen, or there's no sense in doing it to begin with. Those things have to be fixed. Productivity improved by 50%. So now you think that a person is working twice as fast, and they're not. That's not what's happening here. What they're doing is they're working differently. Before, my 1 hour of work was about half of it making products or half of it doing what I was supposed to be doing, and the other half of it was spending time reworking or dispositioning scrap or going to find tools and supplies that I didn't have available to me, or asking questions because I didn't know what that alert sign meant on my machine. So now I'm able to spend a much higher percentage of my time actually doing what I'm supposed to be doing instead of other tasks. And that's where that productivity is coming from. It's not a guy doing things literally twice as fast. What he's doing is he's working differently. The average cost per unit was lowered by more than 20%. One of the unique things that was observed in this process is that the more complex the process, the more lead time was reduced. And this was absolutely counterintuitive. The more people were involved, the more lead time we were able to get out. And it does make sense when you think about it, because things sit and accumulate and wait on your desk for things to get done. And if we can eliminate those wait times, if we can eliminate those queue times in between step to step to step, things can go through much, much faster. Think about having to rush through an emergency order. The hot potato effect, or the hot pink card on this order that's just got to get through today. And you've got Bill assigned to the task, and he takes it to station number 1. Hurry up, get it through. And instead of waiting, it goes right to the next step. Hurry up, it's got to get through. It's kind of like a runner running a race and handing off that baton. When we do that once, and if you can do that through your processes and your cycle one time, you should be able to do it again. And to be able to eliminate the things that are allowing that not to happen on a regular basis. So it was a very good find for this organization to be able to significantly reduce their lead time across the business. Here's an example with a new product introduction process. Before, the value stream map on the wall was 170 days. It took less time for a lady to have a baby than it did to develop this product. Afterwards, what they used was a swim lane format of looking at the various process flows across the different departments. In each row, as you go across horizontally in that right-hand diagram, it reflects a different department. And you can see when things are turning on, when turning off, when they're being transferred to the next department. You can see when all the concurrent work is happening across multiple departments. And each little box is a mini SIPOC, a supplier input, process output customer. And you've got that little mini SIPOC going on, spinning around inside each one of those little white boxes. And that standard work needs to be determined. What was the killer for the process was not the type of work that was done, but how long things waited from step to step to step. Overall, this team reduced their lead time by 70%, and they were able to dramatically increase their new product introduction, the amount of products that they were able to develop and invent and put out available to the customer base. Measure, it's not what you pay a person, but what he costs you that counts. And you have to think, when you hire a new person, and how you measure their effectiveness should not necessarily be in pieces per hour or sales per person. But if we don't train that person effectively and they make a mistake, what's that true cost? There's a lot of ways to look at measurement. As we look at how things are measured across the world, there's a lot of third parties out there that will help you see how good you are or how good you aren't. There's a Shingo evaluation. There's Association for Manufacturing Excellence, AME. There's the Baldrige Performance Excellence. There's IATF, the International Automotive Task Force. There's ISO. There's a variety of systems and standards out there that you can evaluate yourself against or have people come in and evaluate you. And a common standard is seeming to be developed with these third-party groups so that you can see where you've been, looking at a history of several years. You can see where you need to go, and that's that black line. That's the target we're trying to hit. And you can see the blue bars of where are we performing. As you get those third parties in to evaluate yourself, it's very healthy to have a point of comparison. Do you compare yourself inter-industry, inter-department, across the company, across sites? Or do you go outside of your organization to say, you know, who's the best of the best in this kind of process? You have some kind of an arrow of direction. And that's not for you who's doing the graph. That's for someone looking at the graph who might not fully understand. And here the arrow means down should be good, and I want my results to continuously go down. In this particular example, warranty as a percent of cost of goods sold, you can see in year 1 to year 2, they went from a 5 to a 4. Well, that's huge. That's a 20% reduction in warranty. And most people are giving themselves high fives and congratulations and double-digit reduction, yay team. And a point of comparison came along, that little blue square, and that was a competitor. And all of a sudden, that 4 didn't look so good anymore. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, we really stink. So now I'm getting from that 4 to that 3. Now I've got a 25% reduction in warranty as percent of COGS. Yay team again. But we're still not cutting it. So those act as a very strong motivator in several ways. If you're not there, you know it can be done. So it helps your team really think outside the box and know what the possibilities and the probabilities are. If you are truly best of the best, that gives you a marketing leverage that you can share with others. Either way, a point of comparison is generally required when you have a third party come in and evaluate you, if you're really trying to see how your system is performing objectively. Analyze. Why not go out on a limb? That's where the fruit is. And sometimes that limb can be very shaky, but that's where the meat, that's where the potatoes are at, and that's where you got to find the information. And that happens largely through a value stream map analysis. There's lots of ways to do analyze. They all work. You just use the best one that works for you. From a product portfolio perspective, if you recall, this was one of the objectives that the team initially was trying to do as one of their initiatives. And their goal was to hit a 5% margin improvement. And you can see in that top left graph where that black line is vertical, they had 8 part numbers that were meeting the targeted margin. So if the targeted margin was 5%, then 8 part numbers were meeting that 5% margin. They had 3 part numbers that were exceeding that 5%, and they were really bringing home the bacon. They had 1 part number that was making, you know, much more than that, 150%. So 7.5% they were bringing in, or more than 5. On the flip side, however, you can see that the majority of the part numbers were not meeting that 5% objective. Some of them were making 75% of the 5 or 50% of the 5. They were bringing in 2.5% margin. So we're leaving money on the table, and we're not meeting the revenue or meeting the business objective of the business. You can see they had 5 part numbers. They weren't making any money. But worse than that, there was a lot of part numbers that we're losing money on. Every time we made one, we lost money. And if a sales guy goes out and he sells, you know, 1 million of those 2 part numbers that are a negative 100% margin, we can bankrupt the company. So it's a pretty critical measure to try to understand where we're at from a business perspective. So this team went out, they made this graphic, And they pretty much had to look at three things. If my part isn't making the money I need it to make, I can either raise the price, and perhaps I'll lose sales if I do that. There's repercussions, but at least I'm not losing my bacon on the part anymore. Or I could stop offering the price, and again, or stop offering the product, and then again, I lose all the sales on that, but it might not be such a bad loss. Hopefully, I might have another similar product that I can transfer the customer over to, so that they're not left high and dry without an option. The third thing I can do is fix the product. What's causing me not to make that margin? Do I have scrap going on or rework? Is it an efficiency issue? What can I do to fix and address the cost structure of that particular part so that I can leave the price alone but still make the margin? So depending on the various stories that there are for every single one of those part numbers, this team then did do what it needed to do. And it got out of the loss business. You can see now they still have one part number that they're making at 0% margin. And sometimes there's a strategic reason to do those things. But then you need to establish what we call a rule of engagement. How many of those are you willing to sell at that price? Or for how long? Is that price available for 6 months and then it changes? Or does the part number get discontinued after a certain time frame? Because if that is not addressed at that point of release, you're going to end up not controlling this process, and you're going to have that before picture developed all over again. At the end of this process, the team was able to improve their margin base by 22% when they were only looking for 5%. And on top of that, they reduced their portfolio, the number of part numbers, by a little over 60%. So it was a win-win for the business. When we look to improve, I do like this. It's a little bit crude, but I do think it gets the point. 3 kinds of people: one that learned by reading, a few that learned by observing, and the rest that have to pee on the electric fence to see for themselves. And all I can say is shocking. And nevertheless, as auditors, we learn by observing, so hopefully we can watch the others doing the third thing. But how do we make our improvements happen? When we're using this Hoshin Kanri methodology, there was a large movement of management by objective, which is really results-oriented. The X matrix does both results and process, which is also the performance excellence system. It's process and results. The Kanri has the added benefit of that catch-ball process. It's not only vertically up and down, but it's also horizontal, and it's very participative. When you're trying to make change and you've got to control those things and get the new standard work, people's minds are changed through observation and not through argument. As a leader, you can go anywhere in a business and say, you know, Tom, I want you to do it this way. And when you walk away from that process, you're probably not going to see Tom again for a little while. And Tom's going to either think, wow, you're really dumb. I'm not going to do it that way. I'm just going to go back. Or, wow, you've really convinced me. And you have to show them the why of it. People have to understand what are the bad things that are going on. What are those point lessons so that they can understand this is why it needs to be this way. And you can argue till you're blue in the face, but if we don't get that observation and understanding clarified, it's not going to change. Well, what we've done across this process is we've used the X matrix, or the Hoshin Kanri, to define our customers' needs. We used that horizontal methodology to figure out what those measures really needed to be. We can take that business scorecard to determine those baselines and set our performance levels and analyze why we are or are not meeting our objectives. We then investigate those causes for those gaps, and you create a plan of attack. We execute those improvements, and you use the right tool to fit the problem. And there's a lot of tools out there. And to get that control, we need to engage our folks to help them understand the why of it. We use that business scorecard in our human resources to enable accountability. So what's next for you? How do you get engaged? Learn your own personal organization strategies. If you're an auditor, this allows you to see what it is you're trying to do and how you're helping with your business overall. Match those strategies to your objectives. If they don't match, adjust yourself so that you're in alignment with what your business is trying to do. Share how you and your team can make that difference, and then demonstrate your own relevance. One of the things that I'm involved with is the Institute of Management Accountants, the IMA, and we are looking for survey feedback on how our financial community can help our quality and lean approaches. So if you're interested at the end of this session to take this survey, we'd really appreciate your feedback, and I thank you for your time.
Thanks, JD. This ends today's presentation. Thanks for attending.